Hi, I'm Professor Ritchey, and in this video, we're going to take a deeper look at the self-concept. We have already discovered that our self is an object, just like any other object in the world. Our self is present in all of our interactions. Our self allows us to import the social processes so we can imagine and assess various outcomes of our interactions. And our self helps us to coordinate our behaviors with others. We have all pondered the age old question of who am I? In 1954, Manfred Kuhn and Thomas McPartland tried to help us understand this a little bit deeper. They developed the 20 statement test, and this is a test that tries to get at the self concept. I want you to take a pause here and take the 20 statement test. For the 20 statement test, please write 20 answers to the simple question, who am I? Just give 20 different answers to this question. Answer as if you were giving the answers to yourself and not someone else. Write your answers in the order that they occur to you. Don't worry about logic or importance. And take no more than 10 minutes to complete the test. As we go through this video, I want you to keep your test handy so you can assess your self-concept as we go through these ideas. We're going to use some of the ideas presented by Morris Rosenberg in Conceiving the Self. In this book, Rosenberg conducted an extensive review of the literature about the self and organized our ideas about what we mean by the self-concept. I will briefly highlight his conception of the self. Rosenberg defines the self-concept as the totality of our thoughts and feelings with regard to ourselves as an object. He identified three regions of the self: the extant self, this is how we see the self; the desired self, this is what we wish to be like; and the presenting self, how we present ourselves to others. Let's take a look at the extant self. Rosenberg suggested that there are four aspects of the extant self: the components, that's the content of the self; the structure, which is the relationship between the components; dimensions, which are our assessments of the self as an object; and ego extensions. This is when we take external objects to the self and we claim them as a part of the self. When you look at the 20 statement test, this is really getting at the components of our self-concept, that is, the content of the self. As I talk about the different components, see if you can't classify your answers to the 20 statement test into these different component areas. The first component are our social identities. Social identities are groups, statuses, or categories that are socially defined. These include social statuses, both ascribed and achieved. I am disabled. I am middle class. Membership groups. These are voluntary associations based on shared beliefs and interests. I am a sociologist. I am a beekeeper. Social labeling. This is when a certifying agency provides us with the identity. I am a doctor. I am a homeowner. Derived statuses. These are statuses related to a previous status. I am a grandparent. I am pre-retired. Next are social types. These are a series of interests, traits, and habits that cluster together. I am a nerd. I am a health nut. And finally, our personal identity. This is classification into a category of one. It's a unique label to us. I am Lynn. I am a number. I have a social security number that I won't share. There are some special characteristics of social identity that need to be noted. First of all, the categories are socially defined. They are a part of the institutionalized patterns of a society, so they are culturally based. When we interact with others, they are responding to us based on our social identities. We also may have a desire to disassociate with categories that are socially defined, but society requires that we identify with it. For example, I am disabled. The categories are socially ranked and evaluated. Our self-worth may be impacted by the societal rankings of these categories. We also compare and evaluate our social identities with others who have similar identities. The second component of the extant self are dispositions, and these are justifications of our behaviors. Dispositions include our attitudes or our judgments of objects, whether they're good or bad. I am awesome. I am happy. Dispositions also include our traits. I am an introvert. I am confident. It includes our abilities. I am strong. I am a navigator. And our values. I am concerned with humanity. I am independent. When you look at your 20 statement test, how many elements could you identify as social identity elements versus dispositional elements? There are some important differences when we look at the implications for our definition of self between our social identities and dispositions. Social identities are who we surely are, and dispositions are who we feel we truly are. Our social identities are more defined and unchangeable, whereas our dispositions are more abstract and changeable. Our social identities are verifiable, that is, they have consensual validity by others, whereas our dispositions lack this consensual validity. Our social identities tend to be more accurate than our dispositions. The last component of the extant self are our physical characteristics, and this is our image of our physical traits, our body image. It can include our height, weight, attractiveness, sex, body type, age, disabilities. When we look at research in this area, it examines the inconsistencies between our body image and objective facts. For example, my objective height is 5'1", but my body image tells me I'm 6'4". The second aspect of the extant self is its structure, and this is the relationship between the components. The first aspect of structure is its psychological centrality. When we look at the structure of the self, we organize our self components hierarchically. We value some components more than others. For example, my status of professor. I rank higher than my status as a tennis player. When we look at the self structure, we also have to question whether we are looking at part or the whole relationships between the components. Should we focus on specific self-components, or should we consider all the components? Do we have a global self? Finally, we need to decide whether the self-concept is a social exterior or a psychological interior. Our social exterior would be a visible self, our social identity components and our physical characteristics, our concrete behaviors, versus a psychological interior, which is a private self with our dispositions, emotions, attitudes, and desires. The third aspect of the extant self are the dimensions, and this is our assessment of the self as an object. There are several areas that we can consider here. First is the content, and this is our image of self. our identities, dispositions, physical traits, and these are captured in the 20-statement test. The second thing that we can look at is the direction. Are our opinions of the self favorable or unfavorable? In research, we call this self-esteem. Third is the intensity or the strength of our opinions of our various self components or our global self image. The next dimension that we can assess the self on would be salience, and this is the importance of self or a self component. Research in this area, we talk about identity salience. How important is a component to our overall definition of self? The fifth dimension is consistency, and this is the degree that the components are complementary or contradictory. The next dimension is stability, and this is where our opinions of self can change frequently or they can be more firm. The next dimension is accuracy, and this is whether our image is correct or incorrect. We saw our social identities are more accurate than our dispositions, and we can have inaccurate images of our physical traits. The eighth dimension is clarity, and this is how precise or abstract our self-image. Again, our social identities will be more precise and our dispositions will be more abstract. The final dimension is verifiability. This is where we have objective confirmation of our self components. That is, other people would define us in the same way. Again, our social identities are more easily verifiable than our dispositions. The fourth aspect of the extant self are our ego extensions. And this is when objects that are external to the self are claimed as part of the self. We can identify objects that have become ego extensions by our subjective feelings of me or mine, my car, my child, my dog. We will also experience feelings of pride or shame. My child is on the honor roll at XYZ, or my dog ate my homework. And finally, we have introjection, or that feeling of oneness with the object. I think of sports teams, we are number one, or a marriage ceremony where the couple are lighting one candle from two, symbolizing their oneness and unity. Now let's take a look at the desired self, what we wish to be like. The desired self is the reference point against which the extant self is viewed and evaluated. Rosenberg identified three desired self images. The first is the idealized image, and this is an overly positive view of self that exists only in our own mind. We are imagining future selves. When we take the idealized image too seriously, there are potential consequences, including being driven to be the best, wanting to be liked by everyone, a hypersensitivity to criticism, and our reactions to failure may be out of proportion to the occasion. When we think of our desired self, we also have a committed image. This is the image that we take seriously, and it is attainable. For example, my idealized self might be winning the Nobel Peace Prize, whereas my committed image might be winning an award from my peers. Finally, our desired self has a moral image. This is what we should, ought, or must be. Rosenberg identified three aspects of the moral image. The first is consciousness, And this is associated with the conventional norms of morality. I should love my neighbor. I should not lie. I should not kill. The second aspect of the moral image are role demands, and these are associated with behaviors that are required of people occupying particular statuses. As a beekeeper, I should keep my bees alive. As a woman, I should be nurturing. The final aspect of our desired self is our self demands. These are a system of unique behavioral expectations. I must make my bed every day. I must make sure the doors are locked. The desired self is a motive force. It motivates us to act in particular ways based on our image. We are not always able to differentiate between the extant self and the desired self. We may confuse what we wish to be or feel we should be with what we are. The final region of the self-concept is the presenting self, and this is how we present ourselves to others. Our presenting self is not the same in all situations. We will present one side of ourselves to our family, another to our friends, and even another to our employers or employees. Research in this area has focused on how we manage our presentation of self to others, or what is referred to as impression management. Jones and Pittman identified 5 impression management styles. Bolino and Turnley developed these into the impression management scale. Let's take a look at each of these styles. The first style is self-promotion, and the goal here is to be viewed as competent. The second style is ingratiation. The goal here is to be viewed as friendly and nice. The next impression management style is exemplification, and the goal is to be viewed as morally exemplary. The fourth style is intimidation, and the goal is to be viewed as threatening. The final style is supplication, and the goal is to be viewed as helpless or weak. How do you use these impression management styles in your day-to-day interactions? Some of you might be wondering, why do we do this? Rosenberg suggests that we have 4 motives. First, means and ends. Presenting a different self helps us to reach our personal goals, our aims, or ends that involve other people. Second, self-esteem. Our self-esteem is tied to what we think others think about us. This is our perceived self. Self-consistency. It helps us to establish and protect our self-picture. And the last motive is to conform to norms and roles. It's our internalization of the social statuses and the roles associated with those statuses. This has been a very quick overview, and I encourage you to explore more about the self in Rosenberg's Conceiving the Self. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.